SABC News presentation.
Welcome, you're watching Interface here on SABC2. My name is Tembi Samachele. Now, the murder of Orlando Pirates and Bafana Bafana captain Senzo Meyiwa has sent shockwaves throughout the sporting fraternity. And South Africa is once again reeling after yet another cruel murder of a well-known and well-loved South African. But it is just one in many violent deaths that occur daily in our communities, as we all know. Most are lucky if they make the news headlines. But is South Africa a battleground? That's one of the questions we are asking here on Interface tonight. And what should communities do? What can you and I do to help address the escalating crime in our country? To unpack for us this rather daunting challenge, we are joined in the studio by Anna Moyo Kupeta, who is from the Center for the Study of Violence and Reconciliation. And we're also joined by Advocate John Welsh, who is the chairperson of the South African Gun Owners Association. Now, as always, throughout the program, we do take your comments on Facebook. It's Interface on SABC2, and also on Twitter at Tembi Samachele or at Interface on SABC. Now, welcome to both of you. Thank you very much for joining us.
Thank you.
I would like to start with one of the Facebook messages, actually, which I think drove home the point that I'd like to make as we open. And it's coming from Chris January, who says, while every death or murder is one too many, it needs to be noted how segregated our society and public services are. Double standards are exposed every time a high-profile personality falls victim. Top detectives get assigned, forensics suddenly exist, and cracking teams suddenly make speedy arrests. Why can't this be the benchmark for every murder or crime in our country? And I think that just paints the picture of what we'd like to talk about today. And let me start with you, Anna. And the question is, it's a catch-22 for the police, isn't it? Because on the one hand, they've got to be seen to be doing something, but it has to be done without them being seen to be giving preferential treatment to high-profile celebrities. How do they get that right?
Definitely. Thank you, Tembisa. I think one thing that I would want to highlight from the beginning is that there is that normalization of crime in our society. We only really begin to unpack, or we really only begin to raise the radar when a high-profile person has been affected by crime. But it really is something that is going on, that is ongoing in our communities. Most of the time, it is not documented, it is not even highlighted. But there is definitely a need to deal with the normalization of crime in our society. There is need to continue with the momentum. Even where a common man on the street has been killed, there is need for that agency to always be raised, and also for us to actually even begin to probe the questions, what is it that we are not dealing with in our society that is leading to violence and even violent crime that we're facing in our society?
What do you attribute that to, this normalization of the crime?
I think the fact that it happens a lot in our communities, we see it almost on a daily basis. So it has become one of those things that are happening. But it is only when a high-profile person has been affected by crime that we actually begin to say there is an agency, we need to deal with this. And even the reactions from the general public, that's when, even from the police as well, that's when everyone now is on a go to actually begin to deal with this. There is agency, there is people reacting as to why this is happening, but there is definitely a need. If we are to deal with the drivers of violence, we need to be asking probing questions. What is it that is causing crime in our society? What are the key drivers that we need to address? Okay. Is the criminal justice system enough to deal with the violence that we see in society? If it is not enough, what is it that we need to be doing as society?
And those are the questions we're going to be asking tonight. But your thoughts on how the police can get it right?
Yeah.
You know, that catch-22 situation?
Yeah, I think the question by that gentleman was a very pertinent one. I thought it was important to raise such an issue, and I think he made a very salient point, and that is why suddenly, when we deal with a prominent person like Senzo, Oscar Pistorius, various others, suddenly we find that the Commissioner of Police is involved isn't that an activity that she should have entrusted to her local commissioner, the station commissioner, etc., etc.? Suddenly, because of this, the news has hardly broken when we heard that a ransom has been, or a prize money has been, is to be awarded under the circumstances. A task team is to be appointed. Madam, under these circumstances, this is one of approximately 46 to 47 murders that is committed every day. According to the latest crime statistics of the South African Police, we have approximately 46.5 murders committed every day. All those people have been human beings, ordinary human beings, whether they were high profile or whether they were the ordinary man or woman in the street or child in the street.
I hear what you're saying, but is it fair on the police to expect them to have the same kind of reaction every time somebody dies, when there are so many people dying, 46 a day as you highlight?
Yes.
You know, how can they do it?
I think where the problem comes in is the reaction. So often people talk, especially when they talk about murder, they talk about reaction. Has our police service not become a reactionary force rather than a proactive force? You know, Dr. Chris de Kock, who was formerly involved with the South African Police Service in the statistical department, the crime analysis division, he specifically raised that particular issue, and he said over many years that he has been involved, he has realized that many of these crimes, when you do your analysis from a crime intelligence perspective, you could in fact preempt those crimes. You could prejudge what might possibly happen.
So let me ask you then, Anna, why do you think the police are not preempting and prejudging as much as they should be?
I think definitely on the one hand, and this is what is coming out from the general public, this has come up also from the research that we have done, that there is that lack of trust in the criminal justice system by the people. Our police service is seen to be not doing what needs to be done in dealing with crime effectively.
Is that just perception or reality?
It is perception or reality, but also on the other hand, there is also, it's a duty that we have placed upon our police to say they are responsible for dealing with crime and the violence that we see in our society. However, when you really probe deeper, it is not only just a question of the criminal justice system dealing with crime in our society. It really takes more. It really takes even society coming together saying, what are the drivers? Because the criminal justice system, from the evidence that is being deduced, is not enough to deal with crime that we see happening in South Africa. So there definitely is more to be done. And that is what we need to be asking. What is it that needs to be done, even at societal level?
Let's talk about that just after this break, and also, you know, cast a spotlight on gun ownership and the role of society at large in dealing with this issue of crime in our societies. Remember that, as always, we do take your comments on Facebook and also on Twitter. To stay with us. Welcome back. You're watching Interface, and before we delve into our discussion, let's just tell you that from Sunday, November the 7th, this particular show, Interface, will be coming to you live at 8:30 p.m. on SABC2. So do join us as we continue to bring you riveting and engaging discussions on issues that affect you and I here in South Africa. Now, tonight we're talking about the issue of the high violence and crime in our society, and we are talking to Anna Moyo Kupeta, who is with the Center for the Study of Violence and Reconciliation, and John Walsh, who is the chairperson of SAGA. Now, before the break, we were talking about what it is that society can do, but here's one thing I would like to highlight before we get to that issue, and that's for you, Advocate. That is that 53 guns are reported lost or stolen in South Africa every day by civilians. 6 guns are reported lost or stolen by the police themselves every single day. Surely there's a problem there.
Absolutely, I fully agree with you that there is a problem. The Firearms Control Act was specifically drafted and specifically implemented with a view of addressing those issues. You know, the law is quite clear. It pertinently states that one can have in your possession a firearm only under 3 circumstances. The one is it must be in your direct possession. Secondly, you must have direct control over it. Thirdly, it must be locked up in a prescribed safe. Now, the greater majority of people, according to our information, do not carry firearms with them. They have firearms for hunting purposes, for self-defense purposes, for sport shooting,
but
for
53 of those get lost or stolen every day and inadvertently end up in the hands of criminals.
We would like to know how come. How is that possible?
Yeah.
Because the law is very strict and the law is applied very strictly. South African Police Service really go out of their way when they receive information about the loss of a firearm. They investigate, and the National Prosecuting Authority do what they're supposed to do and to prosecute those people. The question is, why don't people adhere to the law? You must remember, our licensing system in South Africa is very strict. It's one of the strictest in the world.
But are you saying that gun owners in South Africa, by and large, are irresponsible,
no,
if these are the numbers that we're seeing?
I don't believe so. I believe the greater majority of them are in fact very responsible in what they are doing. What we do not understand is how it come about that so many firearms are lost or stolen. But one must remember that in many of these instances where firearms are being stolen is not because of ordinary theft, not because of negligence on the part of that owner, it is because of the criminal cycle that we are experiencing. In other words, houses are being broken into, people are being robbed. You know, one of the issues that is very clearly emphasized in the crime statistics is specifically the fact that house robberies, your so-called trio crimes, house robberies, business robberies, they are on the increase.
Okay. Now, we just put up a slide on the screen showing that 88% of men commit suicide using the very same guns. Should we have less guns in the hands of civil society, or of society at large?
I'll just paint a picture like this, Tembisa, to say, for instance, looking at the messages that some of the most common perpetrators of crime in our society will be young black men. For instance, what are the messages that we are drilling into them from the time when they are very young? We tell them they are useless. In most communities, we tell them they are useless, they'll never amount to anything, they are worthless. And having heard this message and they have access to a gun, the first thing that they will use is that they're going to use the gun, because what they grow up hearing is what fuels the anger in them. That is what they have heard, that they are useless, they will never amount to anything. Then they have access to a gun. Gun violence is what then will be next. That's what will follow.
But the ones that own the guns legally, are you happy that there are so many of us having those guns to protect ourselves? Or should there be less of us having those guns because inadvertently they end up hurting us?
In most cases, even those who are owning guns, they actually, in some of the defenses or some of the justifications is that there is less trust, there is mistrust in the criminal justice system. So people are using the guns to protect themselves, to ensure their own security in their private spaces. So this is definitely not a tenable situation. There is definitely a need to have less people owning guns in our society, because the very same guns are either going to be used in self-defense, in private homes, or they're going to be used against other people who are deemed to be perpetrators coming onto a private space of someone, or rather even, as you are saying, someone committing suicide through his own gun or using his own gun.
Do you agree with that?
Yes, I think Anna made a very important point where some people do have this mistrust in the authorities, and for that reason they have to rely on themselves for self-protection and various other things. What I thought was very important in this particular scenario is the fact that when a person acquires a firearm, has that person really considered all the consequences of acquiring that particular firearm? And that is why the South African Gun Owners Association never tell a person you must buy a firearm. What we do say is, sir, madam, you must consider everything very specifically. It is not merely a matter of having the money, going to a gun shop, purchasing a firearm, going through the licensing process. You must consider the legal and moral consequences of acquiring a firearm.
So let me flip the coin on you then and play devil's advocate for a minute. That is one of the criticisms, that we make it so hard and so difficult for ordinary citizens to own firearms, and we can't catch up with the number of firearms that are already in the hands of the criminals. So while you're making it so difficult for me to be able to protect myself, somebody out there is coming for me and has an unlicensed gun, or has got access to one.
That is very unfortunate. We have said that to the South African Police Service a number of years ago when they were contemplating the new Firearms Control Act, and that is, it was vitally important to make sure that an audit was done with regards to all the firearms that are in South Africa, in the previous self-governing states and wherever else. It was also very important that they must focus specifically on illegally possessed firearms, and that they must in fact have a project plan at hand to ensure that those firearms are removed from society, and thereafter one can have a safer society, and the need for the ordinary person to possess a firearm for self-protection would probably be reduced.
That is the long-term solution, but what do we do now when we feel that we are under siege, we are under attack as society? But give us your thoughts on Interface on SABC2, or at Tembisa Magele, or at Interface on SABC. As we take another short break, when we come back, let's find some solutions to this problem. Stay with us. And one more reminder that as of the 7th of November, Interface will be coming to you live on Sundays at 8:30 p.m. on SABC2. Join us for that. Let's continue to have these engaging and riveting discussions about what's happening in our country. Now, as we wrap this up, here's a perception that is there, that crime usually, or violent crimes at least, happen in the most affluent parts of our society. Is that true?
Partly it is true. It happens in the most affluent parts of our society, but also crime happens, and even more so, even in the poorer communities, or communities that we deem to be poor. However, they are not recorded. They go unnoticed. It is almost as if it's normal for crime to take place there. However, when it happens in your more affluent suburbs, to even more high-profile people, that's when actually we record it, that's when we report it, and that's when actually we actually there is a lot of hype around it. However, crime is really happening. The statistics that John was referring to earlier, of having about 46 people being killed almost on a daily basis, most of this are actually happening in communities that we deem to be poor, the communities where almost no one goes there on a daily basis to even take to even record the statistics taking place there. And
let's take a quick look at some solutions now. I mean, this is a huge problem, and obviously it's no one entity or one part of society that can deal with it. But I just want to read another Facebook message from Pemelo Mulotsane, who says, we need to take responsibility also, talking about us as society. These criminals are our brothers, our friends, our neighbors, etc. And our sons and daughters too. They put food on the table, but we don't know where they are working. We buy stolen goods from them, we see pirated DVDs and we ignore them, and we buy. We need to start with the man in the mirror if we want to fight the crime. And I mean, that we can't argue with. It's very true. But let's talk a little bit about why it is that we as a society are maybe blaming government or even the police to say, you sort this out for us. What can we do to come forward and help with this fight?
Let me start on that particular issue. Once again, I thought that reader-writer script, I thought that was very pertinent once again. I like to have a division of 3 responsibilities. First of all, I always say we talk about personal responsibility, and I'm asking myself the question, what do I take personal responsibility for? Secondly, I'm asking the question, what does the community take responsibility for? And thirdly, I'm asking, what does government, and specifically in this case the South African Police Service, take responsibility for? In the first instance, when I talk about personal responsibility, that means I must start with a clean slate. That means I must make sure that I do not do crime. We must move back to where we stated many years ago, don't do crime. You know, in the sporting circles, many of us who have been involved in sporting activities, we have said sportsmen don't do drugs, sportsmen don't do crime, and that is what I'm still saying, and I think we must still adhere to that. When we look at petty crime, common crime in our cities, we look at all these different types of crime, we find that people are absolutely irresponsible. The police can no longer enforce that. So many of those minor petty crimes are there. But if a person cannot take responsibility of the small issues, how can you expect the person to take responsibility of big issues?
And your thoughts on how we can find a solution, particularly as government and the police, because we know that they are inundated with the number of cases that they deal with. We know that budgets are often constrained, training is an issue, but what do we do about it?
Firstly, Tembisa, I just want to say that there is no quick fix solution to dealing with the problems that we're facing, especially when it comes to violence and violent crime in our society. It really will take a functioning criminal justice system. Even where the criminal justice system is functioning and everything is well within the criminal justice system, there is still need for society and communities to take responsibility. First and foremost, ensure that as members of the community and also as individuals, we actually put a stop to this. I mean, when someone is coming with a stolen cell phone, definitely they have taken it from someone. And what we see happening now, probably violently so, or probably someone has lost their life through that robbery, or rather that.
And just to add on that, Anna, most of the violent crimes we read are actually between people who know each other, acquaintances that just don't see eye to eye on something and can't seem to solve their problems. So it's not some stranger coming through and attacking you. What do we do about that?
There is definitely a need for us as communities to begin to rise up and actually publicly condemn criminal behavior that we see in our society. When you see, for instance, where there is criminality, there are mixed reactions from society or from communities, whereby some people actually do they celebrate what is happening and some people condemn what is happening. I mean, even in the recent case, we see some people actually putting blame on others, some people saying what would have happened, possibly it should have happened, because we are also trying to lad a lot of issues onto what would have happened. But there's definitely need to begin to say with one voice that crime in our society, we're not going to accept crime in our society. Crime is exactly that. It is crime and it should be punished, no matter who has done that. But we need to shun it from society. But also
we're running out of time. We're going to have to wrap up. Just quickly, marches, do they help if we march against crime?
Marches against crime demonstrate that people are fed up with criminality, and I think that should be shown. But I think we need to be uniform as far as that is concerned. I think it must be done amongst all races. It need not be done, it cannot happen if only a specific group does that. We need to make sure that this is a uniform approach.
That's right, and that's the note on which we will leave it tonight. Thank you very much to my guests for coming through to talk to us about this very sad and very troubling issue of crime in our society. And thank you very much for participating and taking part in this program. As always, we appreciate your feedback. Do keep the conversation going on our social media pages. Remember that from Sunday, November 7th, the show will be coming to you live at 8:30 p.m. on SABC2. Join us then. Bye-bye.